In 1981, a chemical company found the first direct human evidence of a chemical crossing the placenta in its own pregnant workers. Downstream, 6 water districts drank from the same river. The regulator built to act on it did not see it for 20 years. It arrived in a lawyer's mailing. EPA says the company also knew the water breached its own guideline and said nothing. How does a fact stay buried for 2 decades? The truth leaves a paper trail. Let's follow it. Findings of fact. This is the story of PFOA, also called C8, at DuPont's Washington Works plant near Parkersburg, West Virginia. From 1951, the chemical escaped the plant into the air, the Ohio River, and the drinking water of 6 water districts in 2 states. The case produced the largest civil administrative penalty in EPA history at the time. We will trace how a self-reporting law failed and how 69,000 blood samples finally answered the question the paperwork had buried. The plant on the Ohio. The Washington Works plant sits on the Ohio River in Wood County, West Virginia, about 7 miles southwest of Parkersburg. It is a sprawling chemical works, and for most of the 20th century, it was one of the region's anchor employers. Since 1951, DuPont used a chemical there called ammonium perfluorooctanoate. In water, it becomes perfluorooctanoic acid. The company called it C8 for its chain of 8 carbon atoms. Regulators call it PFOA. In EPA's enforcement filings, the site is listed plainly. The Washington Works facility, Route 892, South DuPont Road, Washington, Wood County, West Virginia. Around it, on both banks of the river, sit the small water systems this story will keep returning to. 6 districts serving towns in West Virginia and Ohio. MEFOA is a surfactant, a kind of industrial soap. It was a processing aid in the manufacture of fluoropolymers, the family of slick, heat-resistant plastics that includes some Teflon products, the coatings on non-stick pans and waterproof fabrics. 2 properties of this molecule drive everything that follows. First, it is entirely man-made. EPA put it plainly in its 2005 enforcement record. PFOA is not naturally occurring, so all PFOA in human blood is attributable to human activity. Second, it does not break down. The carbon-fluorine bond is one of the strongest in organic chemistry, so the molecule persists in water, in soil, and in people, where it stays for years. By the time EPA wrote about it, the agency estimated that the average American already carried about 5 parts per billion of PFOA in their blood serum. Around Washington Works, the chemical had pathways out of the plant. It left through air emissions, through discharges toward the Ohio River, and through landfilled waste. And downstream and downgradient of all of that were wells and water intakes, the drinking water supplies of ordinary towns on both sides of the river. The C8 Science Panel, whose work we will meet later, stated the exposure route for the community in 1 sentence. The principal route of exposure for this population was via drinking water contaminated with PFOA. What the company's files held. What follows in this chapter comes from the United States Environmental Protection Agency's own enforcement record, written in 2005. DuPont settled that case and denied the allegations, admitting no liability. Keep both halves of that sentence in mind. According to EPA, as early as May of 1981, DuPont studied PFOA in its own pregnant workers and their offspring. The result, in EPA's words, was the first direct human evidence of PFOA crossing the placenta in humans. Until then, evidence of that kind existed only in laboratory animals. Now it existed in people, in the company's own workforce, in the company's own files. Federal law had something to say about information like this. Section 8E of the Toxic Substances Control Act, TSCA, requires that a manufacturer who obtains information reasonably supporting the conclusion that a chemical presents a substantial risk of injury to human health or the environment shall immediately inform the administrator of EPA. Immediately. EPA did not see the 1981 data for 20 years. The company also had a number for the community. DuPont's internal community exposure guidelines said PFOA in local drinking water should not exceed 1 part per billion. EPA's record states that DuPont performed substantial sampling of drinking water in homes and businesses near the plant, and that the company understood in 1987 and confirmed repeatedly in 1988 and 1991 that water in nearby homes exceeded that guideline. That information was not reported either. There was one more missed exit. In 1997, EPA asked DuPont, under the plant's hazardous waste permit, for known toxicological information about PFOA. The company responded on June 6th of that year. According to EPA, the response did not include the 1981 human blood data. A direct question, answered incompletely. Each of these moments was a chance for the system to correct itself. The law's design assumed the company holding the data would volunteer it. For decades, that assumption was the system's only safeguard, and EPA alleges it failed. The farmer and the lawyer. The information finally moved because of a cattle farmer. In the late 1990s, Wilbur Tennant, who farmed near Parkersburg, contacted a corporate defense lawyer in Cincinnati named Rob Billett of the firm Taft Stettinius and Hollister. As the New York Times later reported it, Tennant said his cows were dying left and right, and he believed DuPont was responsible. No official finding in the record we use here establishes what killed those cattle. What matters to this story is what the ensuing litigation shook loose: internal documents. Here the account returns to the official record. On March 6, 2001, Robert Billett sent copies of documents to EPA that he had obtained as part of class action litigation against DuPont. That sentence is not from a magazine profile. It is from EPA's own transmittal memorandum. The agency states that it was not aware of the 1981 placental transfer data until Billett sent it in 2001. 20 years of substantial risk information arrived at the regulator in a lawyer's mailing. In August 2001, a class action was filed in the Circuit Court of Wood County, West Virginia, on behalf of residents whose drinking water was contaminated. The case was styled Jack Leach and others against E.I. DuPont de Nemours and Company. And in 2002, EPA took its first protective step on the ground, an emergency order under the Safe Drinking Water Act. DuPont agreed to provide alternative drinking water or treatment for households near the plant if PFOA exceeded a screening level of 150 parts per billion, a level set at the time by a state-ordered toxicity assessment team. Hold that number, 150 parts per billion. It will shrink by 5 orders of magnitude before this story ends. Billett was not finished. In September 2004, he sent EPA blood sampling results that, in the agency's words, DuPont had not submitted. 12 people in the community. Their blood carried PFOA at levels from 15.7 to 128 parts per billion against a national background of about 5. An unusual bargain. The Leach class action never went to a verdict. Instead, in September 2004, the parties announced one of the most unusual settlements in American environmental law. The immediate terms were conventional enough: cash payments and expenditures valued at $85 million, plus $22.6 million in legal fees. An initial payment of $70 million, $20 million of it for health and education projects. State-of-the-art water treatment offered to 6 water districts: Little Hocking, Lubeck, Belpre, Tuppers Plains, Mason County, and Pomeroy, on both sides of the Ohio. The unusual part was how the settlement handled the question nobody could yet answer: does this chemical make people sick? Rather than argue it in court, both sides agreed to hire the answer out to science. 3 epidemiologists, chosen jointly by the plaintiffs and DuPont, would form a science panel and study the community itself. The settlement defined the standard they would apply. A probable link would mean that, given the available scientific evidence, it is more likely than not that among class members, a connection exists between PFOA exposure and a particular human disease. If the panel found probable links, DuPont would fund medical monitoring, up to $235 million. And, according to contemporaneous reporting, the company agreed not to challenge whether C8 can cause those diseases in later injury cases. If the panel found none, the health claims would end. In February 2005, Judge George W. Hill of the Wood County Circuit Court approved the settlement, which was valued at a minimum of $107.6 million. The judge noted, accurately at the time, that the deal was struck without any evidence that the chemical caused disease. That was the whole point. The evidence was about to be created. To build it, the settlement funded the C8 Health Project. Residents who had drunk the water gave blood and medical histories and were paid for their time, $150 to enroll and $250 more for completing 2 blood tests. 69,030 people took part in 2005 and 2006, and the community stayed with it. Nearly 3/4 of the adult participants agreed to join the follow-up studies that the science panel would run over the following years. For a rural river valley, it was a staggering census of exposure, one of the largest of its kind ever assembled. The largest penalty. While the class action was settling, the federal government moved on the reporting failures themselves. In July and December of 2004, EPA filed 2 administrative complaints against DuPont. The counts read like the timeline of this episode. Count 1, failure to immediately report the 1981 human placental transfer data. Count 2, failure to report the contamination of drinking water inside people's homes. Water the company's own 1 part per billion guideline said was too high. Another count alleged that the 1997 answer to the hazardous waste permit request had unlawfully omitted the 1981 data. As the case proceeded, 4 more counts were added. In the end, there were 8, and 7 of them were failures to report under Section 8E. On December 14, 2005, EPA announced a settlement. DuPont would pay $10.25 million in civil penalties and commit $6.25 million more to supplemental environmental projects, a total of $16.5 million. DuPont admitted no liability and denied the allegations. The agency's enforcement chief, Granta Nakayama, described the penalty this way: "This is the largest civil administrative penalty EPA has ever obtained under any environmental statute. Not by a little, by a lot." Set the numbers side by side, because the comparison was made loudly at the time. The largest civil administrative penalty in EPA history was $10.25 million, with $6.25 million more committed to supplemental projects. Whether that is deterrence or a rounding error is a judgment this channel leaves to you. What the record shows is what the money answered for, not the pollution itself, but the silence about it. Every one of the Section 8E counts was about information obtained and, EPA alleged, withheld. The supplemental projects in that settlement are worth a sentence each because they tell you what EPA wanted to know next. $5 million funded independent laboratory testing of whether DuPont's newer fluorotelmer products would break down in the environment into PFOA, the very question of whether the replacement chemistry recreated the problem. Another $1.25 million funded safer chemistry teaching in 7 Wood County schools. The ground-level protections tightened in parallel. EPA's emergency drinking water orders replaced the 150 parts per billion screening level with a site action level of 0.50 parts per billion in 2006 and 0.40 parts per billion in 2009. The number was collapsing as the science sharpened. 69,000 answers. The 3 epidemiologists chosen under the settlement were Tony Fletcher, David Savitz, and Kyle Steenland. From 2005 to 2013, they ran what amounted to a natural experiment that no ethics board could ever have approved on purpose, because history had already run it. Their first problem was measuring the past. A blood test in 2005 tells you today's exposure, not 1970s exposure. So the panel reconstructed it. They modeled how much C8 had left the plant year by year, how it moved through air and groundwater and the river, how it reached each water district, and then matched that against where each participant had lived and worked, decade by decade. That gave them estimated historical blood levels for 28,541 residents who had never worked at the plant. Adding plant workers brought the final study population to 32,254 people, whose past exposure and later health could be compared. Beginning in late 2011 and through 2012, the panel delivered its verdicts. For 6 disease categories, it found a probable link to C8 exposure: diagnosed high cholesterol, ulcerative colitis, thyroid disease, testicular cancer, kidney cancer, and pregnancy-induced hypertension. For testicular cancer, the panel reported that in some analyses, the most exposed groups showed estimated relative risks ranging from 3 to over 6 times those of the least exposed. For kidney cancer, the panel's worker mortality study showed a higher risk in the most highly exposed group compared to lower exposure groups among the workforce, though the risks were not elevated compared to the United States population. A mixed picture the panel weighed openly before concluding the link was more likely than not. Not just as important is what the panel did not find. It concluded there was no probable link to diagnosed high blood pressure, no probable link to coronary artery disease, no probable link to most of the cancers it examined, or to autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. This was not a panel that found what it was paid to find. It applied the settlement standard, more likely than not, and it said no, far more often than it said yes. The panel's own members, reviewing the field years later in the scientific literature, described the cancer evidence as supportive but not definitive. That is what honest epidemiology sounds like. And under the settlement, the 6 yeses were enough. In 2014, a court-approved medical monitoring program opened, offering free screening for those 6 conditions to almost 80,000 eligible class members. What changed? The probable link findings unlocked the personal injury cases the settlement had paused. Roughly 3,550 lawsuits were consolidated into multi-district litigation in federal court in Ohio. 3 cases went to juries, and the verdicts totaled $19.7 million, the last of them $12.5 million, including $10.5 million in punitive damages. Then, in February 2017, DuPont and Chemours, the spin-off company that had taken over the plant, settled everything at once. $670.7 million in cash, split evenly between the two companies. Both denied any wrongdoing. The chemical itself was already on its way out. In January 2006, EPA launched the PFOA Stewardship Program. 8 major manufacturers, DuPont among them, committed to cut PFOA emissions and product content by 95% by 2010, and to work toward eliminating it by 2015. By DuPont's own account, given in 2017, PFOA operations at Washington Works had ended more than a decade earlier. And the number, the one that started at 150 parts per billion in 2002, kept falling. In 2016, EPA issued a lifetime health advisory for PFOA of 70 parts per trillion. In April 2024, the agency finalized an enforceable national drinking water limit for PFOA, 4 parts per trillion, with a health-based, non-enforceable goal of 0. From 150 parts per billion to 4 parts per trillion is a factor of more than 37,000. The chemistry never changed. Our knowledge did. That national rule was informed by many bodies of evidence, and the 69,000 blood samples from the Mid-Ohio Valley are a substantial part of it. The lesson of Washington Works is not that a chemical was toxic. It is that the law knew how to find out and was never told. Section 8E of TSCA is a self-reporting statute. EPA itself wrote that failing to receive that information impairs the agency's ability to take the actions necessary to protect health. For 50 years, the only censor in the system was the company. Every safeguard downstream, the screening levels, the health studies, the water treatment, could only switch on after the information moved. Engineers call this a single point of failure, and this one was made of paper. The fix, such as it is, has been redundancy, mandatory monitoring of water systems, enforceable national limits, and a public that now knows to ask. Whether that is enough is the question every self-reporting regime still has to answer. This has been Findings of Fact. Thanks for watching. Every source is linked in the description if you want to dig deeper. If we got anything wrong, let us know in the comments, we'll pin the correction. And subscribe so the next investigation finds you. Or keep watching, the next one's on screen now.